Hello, all you fabulous, fabulous women and men. Thank you very much for coming tonight. We have a great program planned, and it's going to be pretty highly interactive. We're going to learn a little bit more about this fabulous group of women that are sitting in front of you, and hopefully have a really good, productive conversation about what has transpired over the last year since the last time we all gathered and talked about women in business and entrepreneurship. And what are the next steps to keep going in the trajectory that we've been working on for the last year or so? So, before I get started, just wanted to share a few fun facts to know and to tell your friends. And then I'm going to introduce the panel and tell you a little bit about the format. So, a few things that we looked up, it's been flashing up on the screen, are in relation to elected office. We have been making a lot of progress, especially in U.S. Congress over the past year. I think, if I remember right, there were 12 or 13 new female congressmen. So now we have, let's see, House of Representatives, 23.4%, 23.7% in total in seats in Congress. Senate, 25%, yes, I hear that. And with other U.S. cabinet post positions, 53 women have held a total of 60 cabinet or cabinet level appointments in the history of the United States government. So there's a lot of room to grow and work on that. But we have made a little progress since last year. One of the things I really want to talk about more specifically, though, is business. Statistics on women that are Fortune 500 CEOs. So, not so great. In 2015, it was less than 4.8%, so less than 5%. Anybody want to guess what it is today? It's the same. It's the same, less than 5%. And there have been a few recently that if you've been tracking the news, that have stepped down. And there are a lot of reasons why, and we could spend hours talking about those reasons, and we might get to some of them tonight. So the wage gap. So you'll be glad to know that there is a $513 billion wage gap in the United States that's related to gender pay still. That black women working full-time earn 61 cents for every dollar of white men, Latinas 53 cents, Asian 85 cents. So I only bring these things up not to be a bummer or to diss the great guys that are in the room. I'm bringing this up because there is an opportunity here for us to continue to support women in business and entrepreneurship, and that's really where we want to focus tonight, is how do we get those numbers up and how do we keep women in business successful? How do we support that? So with our panel tonight, we'll be having that conversation. So I'm going to start off with Terry Hockett. Terry is the Vice President of the Technology Association of Oregon. She is a trooper and a leader in trying to figure out how to get more women in leadership roles and just in tech in general. Erica McAlpine is an instructor at OSU Cascades. She instructs young people in the world of business, prepping them for when they get out and become their own success stories. And then Carrie Douglas, who has done 5,314 different things at the same time. But tonight we're going to emphasize her latest creation called The Haven. It's a co-work space created by women for everyone. And then Talina Barker, who has done many, many things as well, including having her own startup you heard about last year, Mission Limelight. This year, she adds one layer onto that. She is our new Vice President of Leadership Development for the Bend Chamber of Commerce. So she is at ground zero at figuring out how to lift everyone up and build leaders and successful people in our business community. So that's your panel today. The format will be, I want you to learn a little bit more about all of these women and how they got to where they are, what they're up to. They're going to share a little bit with you. And then I'm going to go to our, I know you guys have probably seen this before, it's the Menti survey. You use your cell phone, it's real-time feedback. So I want to ask you a few provocative questions just to feed a few of the questions that I'm going to be asking the panel. So we'll have a brief discussion up here, and then we're going to open it up. And again, usually at What's Brewing, we take a lot of time telling everyone, please just ask a question and don't share an opinion or a comment, but we're not going to do that tonight. Tonight, you get to share a comment, you get to share a story, you get to ask a question, as long as it is succinct. We're going to open that up and you get to decide. I know, breaking the rules everywhere. So, with that, what I'd like to do is hand this over, and who's going to raise their hand to go first? I'll start with Terry. You did it. I saw it. So we're going to start with Terry. They're each going to share a little bit about themselves, and then we'll go forward with the survey and an interactive discussion. So Terry, why don't you kick it off?
Is this one on? Okay. Oh, there we go. Hi. Whoa. I have not done speaking engagements for a while, and there's a reason, so bear with me. I'm going to start out by saying I'm an entrepreneur. I was raised by entrepreneurs. My parents had a business from the time I was born until I was 16. It was amazing to go through that process with them. We lived and breathed the business. All of the kids worked for my parents. The business was on our 10 acres, and we got to see every aspect of it, from the business side to what the product was and the shipping and going out the door. You would think at 16, when they lost the business and had to file bankruptcy for making a couple bad business decisions, and I'm going off to college, that I would have said, never again, that's not my path. So as I go off to college, and then I meet some men, and there was one after college in particular that said, on our first date, that he wanted to own his own business someday, and I didn't run, which was good, I guess. It's been 34 years, we've been married. So he launched a company, he sold part of it, went to work for the company that bought part of it, came back, restarted the company, launched it again, or sold it again. And in the midst of all of that, I started working for him, and I decided after a little while that wasn't what I wanted to do. So I said I was going to go out and get a job. And, you know, as you do, you spend hours putting your resume together, and you send it out and hand it over. Here's my resume. Am I good enough? Do you want me? And after you've stepped out of the workforce for any period of time, you don't typically get a really good response. So as a need always drives innovation and companies, I created What's for Work, a career management and job searching website dedicated to women returning to the workforce. I had that company for 8 years before we moved to Bend, speaking all over, had clients all over the world. I had people that were lots of women, a lot of students, a lot of men, veterans, because everybody needed to figure out how to tell their story to get back into the workforce or to change their job into something else that they really wanted to do, and that was part of what we were able to accomplish. After that, for 8 years, and living in Danville in the middle of Bay Area and the craziness, and 2 companies, and the girls were off at college by now, we decided to move to Bend and retire. That lasted 8 months. One of the problems of being a career strategist and a recruiter is that you're always looking at job postings, and the one from EDCO to support TAO, Technology Association of Oregon, and Oregon Bioscience popped up, and I had the pleasure of getting that job and working with a really amazing team. After a year, and it was a 1-year assignment, so that didn't scare me because I was supposed to be retired, TAO picked me up as VP, and I've been in that role for 2 years now. Very exciting, lots of stuff going on. A few things about me: I'm fiercely independent. I grew up in the Central Valley of California. I drove myself to college at 17, 4.5 hours away. I didn't know until I got there and I saw everybody else's parents that you were actually supposed to bring them. Didn't figure that one out. Had a lot of questions, but that was okay. I'm an unwavering supporter of that we should have been taught to celebrate differences and not to tolerate them. And this rolled out in 1991. My oldest daughter had just been born, and so she really got the brunt of that throughout her school years. And I just thought, I don't want to tolerate people that are different. If we celebrate them, we enrich our lives, we get to go to a lot more parties and events, eat great food, and so let's really change that up. And so that was probably my first entrance into trying to be an activist and change things a little bit. I'm also a sidestepper, and this is important because it tells a lot about how we react to things. So my youngest daughter and I did martial arts for about 8 years, studying and teaching. And one of the biggest rules that we learned out of that, when a kick or a punch is coming at you, you sidestep, get away from it, and look for the opportunity to make a strike back, or if you want to invest the energy in that, depending on what's coming at you. So as a woman in business, things come at you all the time, whether it's family, friends, jobs, somebody's angry, a customer. How do you sidestep that and give yourself time to react in a way that is not the first reaction, which is typically not the best, but the one that conveys your message in a way that you want to tell your story and be the person that you are proud of? Beyond that, I work for the Technology Association of Oregon. It's a statewide nonprofit. We serve 450 companies, approximately, anything from Intel and Nike down to solopreneurs, and it's really about helping them move their needle. As I go through this process and got on in the position of power with them, whenever I looked at doing panels or having speakers, I made sure that it was balanced. I looked at that, and it wasn't just the moderator was the only token woman. It was a balanced panel. And a lot of times, and I'm going to tell you this, if somebody comes to you and asks you to do something, they already know you can do it. So say yes. Do not defer that to a man. And this happens about 80% of the time, that you will say, oh, let me get Joe, he can do it. It's like, no, we're coming to you because you can do it, and I would like to hear your voice and see your face on the panel and your perspective. With that in mind, we're launching Power Pairing in June. Well, the first one will be in Portland, and we're doing that statewide. What we found through the BVC and through several other things is that we didn't have enough women representatives, not only in the investor world, but in the people that were actually putting their businesses forward and having that support. So what we were doing is pulling all the CEOs together that are women, and then talking to all of the people that are CEOs and say, who's in your pipeline that we can groom, that we can pull into this group and power pair them up, and so that we are growing that next layer of people, of women in power. And this is just in tech. We're modeling it. As with everything else, I like to roll this out to other industries because we're just one voice and we need a lot of them out there. In addition, I've had the opportunity to spearhead a lot of efforts, and I have to do a little shout out to my East Cascade Works people, because without them, they are the people that get shit done in this town, and Heather knows how to find every penny in every corner of every couch. I love her dearly. She has been able to really sponsor a lot of my efforts going forward. So some of the things we've done is we launched Apprenty. It's a statewide Department of Labor registered tech apprenticeship program dedicated to bringing more women, minorities, and vets into the tech sector. Seattle launched it. They didn't think that a town our size could, but our community came together and said yes. And so we're on our second cohort, just started on Monday. Super excited about that. Yeah. We have done tech force workforce marketing plans. We have 500 plus job openings in tech right now that we can't solve. We have a skills gap here in Bend. We also have a very extreme shortage on labor. And so how do we get more people not only coming to Bend that have the right skills, but also to skill up the people that are here? One of my most exciting things that I'm doing right now is working with the K through 16 Computer Science Pathways program. This is through the CTE and STEM efforts, and it's to bring scope and sequence into the classroom, teaching hardware, software, and cybersecurity to all of our children. We know internationally we are not competitive, and we need to get more education in those arenas to really help our children be successful in life. We are also bringing a cybersecurity camp. It came in last summer, and there is a dedicated 1 week only skills camp for girls in cybersecurity. We've worked with the city council, so last year we were able to pass unanimously, which was awesome. The city of Bend passed a resolution to strive to make Bend one of the most inclusive cities in Oregon and the United States. It's a heavy lift. It's a resolution, so we need to put some work behind it. So Rain Stimson-Johnson and Jeff Kitchens launched the I3, or the Inclusive Innovation Steering Committee that I serve on. And that's really just talking about all of the issues that we are presented with every day, how to be more inclusive, and talk about more of the diversity and leadership and how we can educate more people in that. We've launched STEAM. It's to help women in science, technology, engineering, arts, and mathematics. I take anybody because I think it's all about being inclusive. Mathematics, we have a lot of finance people in there. You wouldn't think that had something to do with tech, but it's math. And it's all about women helping women. We've run a couple programs talking about Equal Pay Act and the Confidence Project. And we support tech companies we launched a diversity and leadership series. We have 5 more classes to go. The next one's March 26th, about respect in the workplace. It's going to be one of our best ones. I'm super excited. Evolve, a professional development series. Again, we all can skill up, and so that launches next month. More information, you'll have that on your resource package. And to kind of wrap it up, it's all about helping one another. So when other organizations and industries have things show up, be there and learn from them, learn from all of the different resources. What we found when we did this event last year and then we got together afterwards is a lot of people didn't know what else was going on in Bend. And so we went through some work of putting together some resources that we'll be able to send out afterwards so that you can see all the great things that are actually going on here. Thank you.
Wow, that's a lot.
No
I don't know
pressure.
if I have anything to say. Do I? Okay. So I don't represent OSU Cascades, but I work for OSU Cascades. And what I do there, I'm a business instructor. Is it? Okay. Does that work? Okay. So I'm a business instructor. I specialize in human resources, organizational behavior, and development. And I'm dabbling in diversity and inclusion. I've sort of been thrust into that area since I came to Bend, and I am loving it. So what am I doing in the classroom to help women grow and develop at OSU Cascades? Really, I teach them all the same. I can't say that I put the boys in one group and the girls in another group. I don't do that. And while I'm on this topic, let me say, there was a fabulous editorial written to the source about the women's issue. And someone felt that the source did not need a women's issue, that it was totally and completely ridiculous that women are celebrated enough as it is. So let me just say, some of the statistics that Katie shared show that women aren't quite where we need to be just yet. You may look around you and see a lot of women in this room. However, we're not represented at the table where we need to be everywhere. And men, this is not any type of barraging of men. We like you. We really, really do. It's just to celebrate us and make sure that we're all on the same playing field, playing the same game with the same equipment. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so again, I just teach my students to think objectively. That's the goal. I see with my students in the beginning of the term, some of the young ladies start off very timid in the subjects that they are willing to talk about in class, the things that they're willing to share. I get them all to do current event presentations, and this is how I learn who they are, what subjects are important to them that are happening in the media right now. And one young lady that started out very shy at the beginning of the term just did a current event about blackface in class and expressed to her classmates why blackface is offensive, and my face was the only black one in the room. So for her to care enough about that issue to bring it up and talk about it really made me proud that she, as a woman, felt enough strength and courage to be able to do that. And as a woman, that's what we need in the business world, right? Strength and courage. So a little bit about my background. I grew up in Brewing, Alabama, very small town, one stoplight kind of thing. Walmart is the best place to go in town. I didn't grow up in the inner city. Okay, all black people don't come from the inner city, so I didn't grow up in the inner city. I did not have a bad childhood or anything like that, and I grew up, went to college, however, I met a man. And I got married, and then I had a child. And then I went to work, okay? Priorities changed a little bit. Well, I got tired of being told no. You can only go so far because you don't have a college degree. You can only go this far in the organization because you don't have a college degree. I got tired of that. So I went back to school. I graduated with my bachelor's degree at 40 years old. And I'm 44, okay? So a lot has happened in 4 years. But I want to let you know, it's never too late. The opportunity is always there, and I share that story with my students. Many of our students, our average age at OSU Cascade is 26, 27 years old, and our students are working hard to get that degree, but the value of the education is important. You know, we have a lot of different sources now wondering whether or not education is important. Do you need a college degree to be successful? Employers are looking for a lot more than the piece of paper. It shows your commitment to something, that you can stick with it for 4 years and actually get through and succeed. I know it's really changed my life, so that's what I show my students in the classroom. In terms of building a career as a woman in academia, I can say OSU Cascades is very female friendly. Our leadership team is largely made up of women. Our Vice President Becky Johnson is here tonight, and I really thank all of them for coming out to support me. But out of the business faculty, there are 6 of us, and 5 of us are women. So we're very female friendly here at OSU Cascades. However, I came from the University of Alabama. And as much as I love the Crimson Tide, it's a good old boys society, very much, in the business school there. Out of about maybe 40 faculty, you would have maybe 5 women. And before I left, I was the only woman of color. So they have a lot of growing to do. It's hard. It was much harder for me there than it is here, which is one of the reasons why I left. At a school like Alabama, it's prestigious, you know. They have a great football team, but I wanted more out of my career, and I wanted more opportunity. So I wanted to, that's why I came to Bend. And coming to Bend, we were talking earlier about how unique Bend is in terms of really a lack of diversity. But I will say that OSU Cascades was very honest with me. If you've heard me speak before, you've heard about my challenges that I've had, challenges my children have faced in town. However, I appreciate all of you for coming out and for listening to me and others tell their stories about what life is like in Bend. And the more of that we have, the more we'll grow as a community, because I'm invested in being here. I just told you how long I stuck at going to school and what I'm willing to work and do. I'm willing to do the same for this community. So thank you.
Should have volunteered to be first. So I'm Carrie Douglas. I'm going to speak from a couple different perspectives. So I'll give you a brief intro to who I am. I am on the Ben Lapine School Board here, so I'll talk a little bit about being a female politician. I am a bit of a serial entrepreneur. Unfortunately, it's not the kind of entrepreneurship that takes venture money and then sells for millions of dollars, so I need to get into a different kind of entrepreneurship. But I've helped to start several new nonprofits. I'm starting one right now, focused actually on supporting school board members across the country with a specific focus on leaders of color and issues of equity. My husband and I own Cascade Relays, which is a local small business, and I'm founding The Haven, which is a co-working space, as Katie said, by women for everyone. And so I'm going to talk mostly about that tonight. And so, I'm starting a business focused on women. And when I tell people that, I usually get a fairly strong reaction one way or the other. And when I tell women, I generally, not always, but generally get a visible sense of hope and excitement and just sort of disbelief that there's going to be a space and an entity in Bend whose sole purpose is to help women in leadership and entrepreneurship and politics to be successful and to reach your dreams for your family and for the community. So that's really fun. And then mostly when I talk to men, not always, but mostly, I get sort of a puzzled look. Not one of a lack of support, but more of, why is that necessary? And so going through the experience of pitching the Haven over the course of about 6 or 9 months, it was actually my husband who kind of noticed a trend because I would come home from some meetings so amped up about the idea and sure that it was a great business idea and feeling really confident. And I'd come home from some meetings really dejected and I don't think we should do this. And finally, after a couple of weeks, he was like, every time you meet with a man, you come home not feeling really confident about this business idea. And every time you meet with a woman, you come home feeling really excited about it. And so that experience, I think, really highlights 4 things that I've been thinking about with regards to women in business and that I'll talk a little bit about tonight. One is, if women aren't starting and leading businesses, the needs of half of our population will go unmet, and therefore a huge amount of opportunity and money to be made will be left on the table. And I really recognize that because, again, the men wanted to be supportive. They just hadn't seen the need that I saw because they didn't fill the gap of a lack of support for women and a space for that in the community. So that's 1. 2 is the need for women-focused networking groups and spaces, which I'll talk more about. 3 is the need for male advocates and partners in this work. And 4 is the need for more women in politics. And I did just want to take a moment because I think it's really important to be intentional in this work. And I know Katie's going to ask us a question about what we can do to support women in business, and my answer is be intentional about it. So I also want to be intentional that a lot of times when we're talking about women in business, we're really talking about wealthy white women in business. And a lot of the statistics that you hear about, as bad as they actually are about mostly wealthy white women. And when you start to talk about women of color, women from low-income backgrounds, people who identify as LGBTQ, those percentages get so much worse. And so to me, it's really important when we talk about women in business that we're intentionally talking about the most underserved segments of women. But every time I say women tonight, I don't want to have to say women and women of color and women from low-income backgrounds and LGBTQ. So just know that every time I say women, I think it's really important that we have an intentional focus on all women and not just wealthy white women. If women aren't starting and leading businesses, we're missing a market. And I'll just use co-working as an example. Co-working came out of the tech space, which is mostly a male-dominated space, and so co-working sort of grew out of a mostly male space. So think pool tables and kegerators and kind of industrial-looking spaces to generalize. And so when I started doing focus groups and talking to people about whether we needed an additional kind of co-working space in Bend, I heard a resounding yes across all these different dimensions. So women and men talked about the design of the space being warmer and softer, the amenities, thinking about mothers, having a luxurious nursing room that isn't an afterthought or a closet, programming that focuses on work-life balance and focuses on mothers, and even just the membership model. The need in tech is mostly to have a big screen and a dedicated desk, and women talked about wanting more space for conversation and collaboration and meeting with people. And so, the response has been overwhelming. We're probably going to sell out before we open. And again, this need wouldn't be met if we weren't investing in female entrepreneurs and business owners who are looking at things with from a different perspective. So that's one. Two is the need for women-focused networking groups and spaces. And I sort of feel this in my heart and bones, but the Harvard Business Review just came out with some new research this week. So I'm going to read a couple of sentences from them. They found that while both men and women benefit from having a network of well-connected peers across different groups, women who also have an inner circle of close female contacts are more likely to land executive positions with greater authority and higher pay, while there was no link found for the success of men in terms of the gender composition of their inner circles. And they hypothesize that the reason is that women trying to rise up into leadership face cultural and systemic hurdles that make it harder for them to advance, such as unconscious bias. And the study suggests that a way to overcome some of these hurdles is to form close connections with other women who can share experiences from women who have been there and done that, from how to ask for what you're worth to bringing your unique talents to leadership. So it's really great to see research supporting what I believe to be true. Three is the need for male advocates and partners. And the Haven is female-focused, but it is not female-only, and that's very intentional for a few reasons. First, men still hold the majority of power and resources, and so women can't get to parity on our own. We literally have to have men at the table helping us to be more successful in this work. And one brief anecdote to that point about the starting of the Haven, when we found our dream space, and I naively thought that if I wanted the space and I had good credit, I could just lease the space. And it became clear that the landlord wasn't going to lease to me. It's a risky business, it's a startup, I'm young, I'm female, who knows the reasons, but it became clear that we weren't going to get the lease. And so we turned to a friend, an older white male who knew the landlord, and he wrote a letter to the landlord, and that is the reason that we got the lease. And so it's such a good example of a man using his privilege to encourage another man to take a bet on a young woman and a business that he believed in. So that was cool to see. And the second reason we want men in our space is because our men and boys are suffering too. And, they may still hold power when you look at the numbers, but their mental health is no better than ours and maybe worse. And when I talk to people more and more about women in business and just supporting women in general, there's just this sense that a lot of our, especially our young boys, are also not growing up with real intention around their leadership. And so we just really want the Haven to be a place where we talk and work towards all of us living better and happier and more connected lives, but with intentionality around women. And then finally, just speaking briefly to the importance of having female politicians, because I think it's really important. We have to be at the table. And one way to address issues like childcare, Talina's going to talk in a minute about what the Chamber is doing, and I so appreciate the work. The other way to deal with really entrenched issues is to change policy. We all have limited time and social capital and priorities, and so I don't necessarily fault men for not prioritizing things like childcare and maternity leave in policy, but they haven't. And so we need to be at the table where we are actually the decision makers. And one thing I learned while campaigning that I think is very true is that women have to be asked 7 times on average to run for office, whereas men only need to be asked once. And men tend to overestimate their qualifications for the job, and women tend to underestimate it. Literally, if you just ask a random group of men if they're qualified to run for elected office, most of them will say yes, and most women will say no, even if they have the same qualifications. So one of my push to all of you tonight is if you know a woman who you think should run for public office, ask her and then ask her again and again and again, because once is not enough. And the last story I'll tell, because I think it just speaks to how far we've come, but how far we have to go, is that When I was campaigning for school board, I was pregnant with my second child. Now, I already owned a business, was running a national nonprofit, had a child, was running TEDx. I had sort of proven that I could have a child and still get things done. But I was asked multiple times in formal settings and countless times in informal settings, how are you going to balance having a baby and being an elected official? And if you think for a minute, you can't even imagine a man campaigning with a pregnant wife at home being asked, how are you going to balance being a father and an elected official? It would not happen. Right? And so my question to us is, how are those gendered views so ingrained in what we expect and believe that women can do? And how can we change the conversation? And I look forward, I have so many heroes in this room, humbled to be at the front of it tonight, and look forward to continuing the conversation with all of you.
Hello. Thanks, ladies. Okay, so my name is Talina Barker, and I'm the Vice President of Leadership Development at the Bend Chamber, and I just want to tell you really briefly what that means and why I'm in that position. So the Chamber has sort of two arms. There's the 501c6 that deals with advocacy and connections and resources and collaboration, and then there's the 501c3 that has historically run Leadership Bend. And in some conversations, we realized that we could do a lot more around the entire life cycle of what does it look like from the very first time, whether you're a man or a woman, the very first time that you have a meaningful work experience, all the way through to the time when you're retired and you're considering, how do I give back to my community or bring up people behind me? And so that's the role I play for the Chamber right now. Our programs include Youth Career Connect, which you heard Scott talk about, Bend Young Professionals, which is an amazing place to, men or women, again, connect and network and build that kitchen cabinet of folks to help you move ahead in your career. Leadership Bend, which is about community succession planning. So this is leadership development generally, but primarily about how do you develop the community leaders of the future. How many people in this room have ever been in Leadership Bend or are currently? Yeah, so these are the people that are here at the table having these conversations because they've learned about their community, they care about it, and they know where to go have the conversation. And then finally, we're doing some work with retired individuals now. We're starting a new program that's a mini Leadership Bend, where let's say you're a retired woman and you've relocated here to Bend and you've got an incredible skill set, but you don't know how to get plugged into this community. We're gonna help you do that. We're gonna help you figure out the same thing. How does this community tick? What are our priorities? What's your skill set? And how do we get you to hit the ground running? Now I'll back up to how did I end up in this position? So for the last 17-ish years, I've been raising money for nonprofit organizations. And I decided toward the end of that career that I had a really great idea to help nonprofits raise more money and help businesses tell the story of their giving. So I became a scalable entrepreneur, which is a really, really crazy position to be in with whether you're a man or a woman. And I realized a lot of the things that I needed or that I felt I needed to move ahead weren't available here in Bend. So I went to Portland multiple times a month for multiple nights to get the education and training that I needed as an early stage entrepreneur. And so Christine Callahan and I, there she is. Hey, Christine. We brought to the Chamber some really interesting statistics about women and entrepreneurial funding. And that includes women get 2% of the venture capital funds nationally. And you'd think it'd be better when it comes to conventional loans and small business administration loans. It's not much better. They get less than 5% of that. So there's all this money on the table, and we were, as women, we're like, how do we get the training? How do we get credibility? How do we access this money? And we brought these issues to the Chamber, and that launched a conversation about what became the Year of Women in Business. And that was really about identifying what are some of the barriers that women face uniquely to women in business, and are there some that we can actually take on and do something about? And we did something with two of those issues primarily. BendX was the first. Christine Callahan and I founded BendX, which is an early stage entrepreneurial boot camp for women. And they went through classes, and I think there's a few of our cohort members here, which is super awesome. And in addition to cohort members, I see at least 15 people in this room that helped BendX be. And that was the first thing that we did as the chamber to kind of move this needle forward. We really felt that not only was this something that Christine and I wanted, if we give folks the education and the tools that they need as women earlier, are we going to give them a leg up in terms of having a seat at that funding table? And then thirdly, it was really about building a network of not just your peers that are going through the cohort with you, but also people that you might not normally have access to, whether it's a funder like Jeff from Craft 3, or whether it's a potential mentor like Michelle O'Hara over there from Zola Media, who taught us about how do you work your PR campaign, how do you talk to the media. We were really able to give women connections. And the other thing that the chamber took on, which I wasn't a direct part of, but was really the childcare crisis and desert that we face here in Central Oregon. Not only you can be as wealthy as you want and still not find childcare in Central Oregon because we just don't have enough. You can't buy your way up a list here. And so the chambers worked really hard to identify what are the barriers to getting new childcare facilities, high quality childcare facilities into Central Oregon. And Katie and her team have been working hard both with City Council, with Bend Park and Recs, and then also at the state level. And there's a lot of exciting things going on there. So I'll just back up just a tiny bit. Everybody talked about sort of how they landed here in this particular position. I'm similar to, but a little bit different than Erica. I had sort of an erratic home life as a child. It was pretty crazy. We moved an awful lot. And I started college when I came out of high school, and then I found myself pregnant with my first child, my son Nick. And I was 19 years old, and I dropped out of college. And I stayed home for a while with my child, and finding childcare and a position that allowed me to pay for the childcare to work, and work for my family to find money, but also work to find meaning for myself. It was really a tangled web, and I tried to start college back up again a few times, and quite frankly, I never did. So I'm sitting in front of you, not a college graduate, who's had to make some interesting decisions as I've gone through life about, you know, what can I do? Here I am, and I want to be right there. I want to be where you're sitting. What can I do to get from here to there? Where every job description I see says bachelor's degree required. And so it really became getting creative and using my network to get in the door, first of all. So that would be something I would say. Education is absolutely valuable. I am not here to say, do not get an education. I am selling OS New Cascades hard right now. But what I want to say is that if for some reason there are barriers to that for you, there are people who can help you, who can open doors, who can support your work. So what I would like to do now is go ahead and stop, because we talk about what the barriers are that we see as women, as the chamber. I think we're really excited to kind of hear some feedback from all of you and make this a two-sided conversation. So back to Katie.
Thank you. Pretty amazing stories and a lot going on. And this is just a sampling of what's happening in our community to support women in business. And it's very cool to hear about it tonight. So we're going to move forward and ask you a few questions. And I apologize for the sunshine. When's the last time we got to say that? Yeah, deal with it, people. So it's a little faded, but it's all good. Here's how it works. You take out this thing, you go to www.menti.com and use the code 125752. What that does is it plugs you into a website so you can it'll prompt you with questions, and you can give immediate feedback, and it's all going to appear up on the screen. Does your company have 30% or more representation of women on your leadership team? Not just overall, leadership. So I'm thinking we just need a bunch of people to stand up in front of that window. So this is yes, this is no. It looks pretty, actually, it's not all that bad. It could be worse. 32% right now, 34% saying yes. 30% or more of the folks in your business in leadership positions are women. 40% to 20-ish%. So that's pretty good. So the next question, but it could be better. Let me end with that. 30% is a low bar. Good point. 30% is a low bar. It's why I didn't, so if I would have put 50% up there, I made this decision because I was afraid it would be like 10. So I wanted to give it a fair shot. So good point, Carrie. All right, next question. So 56% at the end to 23. Next question. A little bit of a provocative question. Has Me Too had a positive, negative, or both types of impacts to your workplace? We've been hearing a lot about this. There's a lot to talk about around this issue. And it's probably all true within some context. I love this app with the little things that go flying around. Yes. Okay. Hashtag Me Too is the movement. It was, almost 2 years ago now? Hashtag Me Too is the movement that started about women who have been harassed.
It started way before that.
Yeah, it started way before that. There's way before that. Go for it.
Actually, Tarana Burke was just in town last weekend at Muse, and she was the founder of the Me Too movement. It's been around for over 20 years. It was just publicized a couple of years ago when a celebrity tweeted hashtag Me Too, but she's been doing the work for a very long time. And it started to support women that have been sexually assaulted, not women that have been harassed in the workplace. And I think that's where we get a misconception, because many of the actresses in Hollywood came out about workplace scenarios that happened to them for them to get work. And it does happen, harassment definitely happens in the workplace, but Me Too was started to support young women and girls and women that have been sexually assaulted.
Thank you. Thanks for asking the question. So, a lot to talk about around that in the bigger context and the more, accurate context of it. So it looks like a lot of folks have been talking about this in wow. I can imagine some of the conversations of, gee, I want to actually meet with the guy to do some business. Is that still okay? I want it to be okay because we need you guys. And there's been whole conversations around human resources issues and whatnot around that. And there's many other discussion points around that. But so it looks like almost 60% have had, yes, this was a positive experience, but it had some other things that came out of this that were challenging. Negative 4, and then positive quite a few over there too. So it's definitely something that's all over the board here. Next question. All right, so this is where you get to type in a word. Name one tool you think, or an asset, that is most important for helping women to succeed in business. And this is going to form a word cloud. So all of your words are going to appear up here. And if something is said more, it'll be larger in size compared to smaller in size for just one or two. Lots of mentoring. These word clouds, I love these things. They're really empowering. All right, so it looks like we're settling around confidence, connections, mentors and mentoring, opportunity, network is in there. I see some support childcare, thank you. Women in leadership positions, tenacity, etc. I wish it was a little brighter, but again, too bad, the sun's out. So mentoring, confidence, connections. So we wanted to go through this exercise. Thank you for those of you who participated with us tonight who were able to. Put my glasses on. So now that we've kind of posed these questions, I want to ask, but for time's sake, guys, I think we're going to do one question. I want to ask a question as kind of a follow-up to these prompts. And then we're going to turn it out to the audience so you folks can share your experiences, your questions, your comments, etc. So let's go to the question that Carrie alluded to earlier. What is the thing that is most important in your mind that we can do in the position you're in today and in position of being a female leader in your capacity to create more opportunities for women coming behind you or in parallel with you? How do we make those numbers go up? And I'm going to start at the other end. Talina, you get to go first.
Is this on? It's on? Okay. It just takes a second. Okay. I would say in the position that I'm in right now, it's about education, collaboration, and reaching back to the people who were where you were just 5 years ago. I think that's so important. We saw that up there, the mentoring, the confidence, and the connections. We've heard so much about networking, and I'll give a shout out to the Dev Labs, the Young Professional Dev Labs that's coming up. There's a how to network with intention and meaning, not that kind of like, hi, here's my business card, we should have coffee sometime. But how do you really dig in deep and make meaningful connections when you're mentoring? So there's a development lab coming up for young professionals on that Julie Harrelson is teaching on April 11th. But with that, I just think the power of educating each other, collaborating with each other, and building your own strong network that helps you get where you need to go.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds really simple, but I think I would just say it's about being intentional about it. We are all busy, and we're all so busy doing the work and running the business and doing our job that you have to really stop and say, what can I do to be intentional about clearing the way, changing policy? You know, as soon as I finally was at the cabinet level of a company, I started rewriting the policy handbook to be better for all families, you know, dads and moms, and lots of different issues. But I had to use my time and my political capital to take time to do that when I already had a big job just running the company. And so I would just say being really intentional, talking about it, making goals about it. If your company has, 5 goals that you're all trying to reach this year, and equity for women or better work-life balance or whatever is important to you isn't actually written down as one of those company goals, it's simply not going to happen.
I would say 2 things. Networking. In my leadership class, we have an entire class that's dedicated to networking and the importance of networking and how sometimes networking can feel a little dirty. You know, you feel like, am I establishing this relationship genuinely? And the answer is yes. For me, I build friendships. And hopefully it can turn, into a legitimate friendship. But now I know this person, and maybe I can call on them to, help me do this, or we can go do something together, and I learn from them and they learn from me. The second is never stop learning. You never know everything. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you do. You never know everything. You can learn a lot from people if you just listen. I learn just as much from my students as they learn from me. I'm so thankful for our HR team that lets me come and play with them when I get ready. And just listen and learning and being as much as you can, not necessarily in the classroom or earning a degree, but learn as much as you can from everyone around you.
And I would say, know your why. There are 7 reasons that I tell every person as they are making a decision in their career, if they're asking for a raise, if they're not negotiating. So I'm just going to read them to you really quick. Women are almost twice as likely as men to live below the poverty line during retirement. That's about $14,000 right now. Women make less money during their working years. Women receive significantly lower retirement benefits than men. It's $15,000 to $25,000 per year on average. That women get $15,000 in their retirement and men get $25,000. Women's traditional roles as caregivers can negatively affect their retirement security. Women are living longer than men. So we negatively affect our security, and we have less money, and we're living longer on less. Women who are single, divorced, and widowed face a higher rate of poverty in retirement. Women save less. Due in part to short careers and lower earnings, women as a group save less for retirement than men. Know your why when you make career decisions.
Wow, that was great. Thank you. Great stuff. And so now is the time, and Garrett, if you could give that to the fabulous Katie Anderson over there. Katie is going to help me, because it's easier to have 2 Katies in the front, She's going to help me just work the room and ask questions. And I've asked Katie to ask the first question. Those of you who don't know Katie Anderson, she owns Aparian Management, property management, business owner, female. Might have heard of her, kind of famous. And she has been, she generously offered to help do the questions tonight. So we're going to try and limit you. So I know there's a lot of things you want to say, and I just ask you to be sure and keep it succinct so everybody gets a chance to weigh in on this tonight. And that's the only rule. Katie, you're on.
Thank you. Katie's the power name in Bend, if you haven't come to understand that.
Raise your hand if you're a Katie. Yes.
It's a power name. And frequently on conference calls where we have to specify which Katie's talking. So Carrie alluded to this, but as a women leader, as somebody who's building a business that I would say we are far exceeding the 30%. We're more on the 60% of our workforce that is women in leadership, but also that we're mentoring into leadership roles. What is the one question that you get asked as a women leader that you know your male counterpart would never be asked and you hate to answer?
And it can't have to do with your shoes.
And Carrie already said babies, you can't. So let's start with Erica.
Okay. I remember specifically when I was in the doctoral program at Alabama, I was told, not asked, but told by a faculty mentor that I would never be taken seriously because of my age in academia. So we already know never ask a woman how old she is, right? But there was nothing wrong with my age at the time. My age was average for people in a doctoral program. I was just older, the oldest one in my particular cohort at the time. And he also told me I would never be taken seriously because I'm a single mother. So that hit hard with me. And don't let things like that take away your worth as a woman. Know that you can do anything.
So it's interesting when you are trying to raise money for a company, you're asking people to trust you with their funds. I got asked frequently, do you have the support of your husband in this endeavor? And I like to think that a funder would also ask a man or a male-led company, do you have a good support system at home? But I felt that it was very different in the sense of being a female, that it was very husband-specific, and that's right along the lines of Carrie's comment, which I had received multiple times, you know, how are you going to manage it all? Well, I don't think people ask Kurt Barker that quite as often, but maybe they do they?
I think similarly, I got asked this question by my boss, and it came from that he is such a good man and cares so much about his employees, and that's why I asked it. But as soon as I got pregnant, he asked me if I wanted to decrease my hours. And again, like how thoughtful and what an assumption about my ability to keep doing my job, or what, you know, assuming that I would want to do that. And I'm quite certain that, again, when men's wives have babies, that their bosses are not asking them if they want to go to part-time.
So my first Chamber of Commerce meeting, not in this town. I had just launched my business. Yeah, not here, not even in this state. There were two gatekeepers at the door, and I knew I had to speak about what my business was, and they were, so what are you out here tonight to do, little lady? That was exactly how it was phrased, older gentleman. And I had a partner with me who knew that I did not like that phrase. And he was like, oh no, this is not gonna go well. So I said, you know, my spiel, I'm launching What's for Work, a career management and job searching website dedicated to women returning to the workforce. And they physically laid back, like into the door, crossed their arms and crossed their legs. And I was like, okay. So I leaned in and I said, I assume both of you have had a mother at some point. Yes. maybe a sister or wife, you might even have a daughter. And they said, yeah. And I said, have they ever had trouble getting back into the workforce? I had them right there. So know your why and being able to tell them how this hits them. So wherever you're doing in business, it's not just about you, but it's how is it affecting them.
Thank you, panel. I have a question from the way back.
Hi. Tagging on to the wisdom of knowing your worth and value in the workplace, I'd like to know how the four of you could conceive of a type of seminar or activity that could be repeated in town showing women how to negotiate their worth and value. Because I think some of the reasons why we see such a low parity and why we see women slamming into the glass ceiling, accepting CEO positions that would be impossible for men to do too, but they're willing to fail for the opportunity, is not knowing how to negotiate that salary.
Who wants to take that first? Go for it.
So oddly enough, we've already talked about this. Katie and I have, and also the STEAM, and I think it's a great thing for the Workforce Investment Board. Just saying, negotiation skills would be super valuable.
I would say as a woman, we face a lot of stereotypes. If we are, if we raise our voices, we are emotional. If you raise your voice as a black woman, then you're automatically angry. But positive emotions are associated with men that show the same type of emotions. So I think we have to break down those barriers first, and show that women can have thoughtful opinions and know our worth and argue for that without being considered emotional, hysterical beings.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be having those kinds of conversations at the Haven for sure. Women definitely undervalue their qualifications. As I said, they do it in politics. We were just talking about another study that Talina read where the vast majority of women who applied for a job met 100% of the qualifications. Like, they only applied for the job if they met 100% of them, and only 20% of the men met like 50% of the qualifications. Like, they just put themselves out there for jobs that they're not qualified for. But I want to sort of turn the question on its head, because I actually don't think the biggest problem should have to be women better negotiating for themselves, because we should have men and all leaders working towards pay equity policies, transparent compensation conversations, and advocating for us so that we don't have to advocate for ourselves. So just by continuing to ask questions in that way, we're putting it on women to negotiate when it's really a systemic problem.
I'm just going to tack on to what Carrie said. I really think it's incumbent on all of us as business people to look at our policies, to look at how we communicate our opportunities, and to look at what the seats at the table are to bring folks up. Absolutely, I think we should have some classes for women about recognizing your worth, but at the same time, we need to be working with employers about how is it that you build diversity at your table, because we know that when a table has all of the voices at it, you come out with better decisions. You've considered viewpoints, you're coming out with better ideas, and so the idea that we are filling the table with the voices that we need to be effective is just important.
Thank you. Katie, did you have somebody on your side? And then I got someone back here next.
Hello. I'm Crystal. I write for The Source freelance, and I saw your article and your cover, and you looked amazing, Erica. I also went to graduate school in the South, and I just want to say a lot of positive things reside in the South as well, and I gained a lot from that experience. I am wondering about something that's really important to me, which is broadening the narrative for women. So instead of kind of expecting women to enter CEO or C-suite positions and be like men, what does it look like for women to enter leadership and be like women? And just to follow up on that, I wonder what role in Bend, when we just have 1 month that celebrates women, versus equally incorporating women into all of our literature all the time, what role things like that play in kind of isolating women and expecting them. I work in the outdoor industry, so one pressure is like big air, adrenaline. You know, as a woman, what are you doing that's big air or adrenaline driven? But I want to advocate for women in the outdoors in their own narratives.
Yes, be women without being men. Someone asked me tonight, I met someone and they asked me, how did you do that? How did you manage to get on the cover of The Source? How did you manage to get Woman of the Year? I don't know. You know, that was my first answer. And then she said, no, you had to do something. And I said, I've been being myself. And being your authentic self is not being a man, it's being who you are as a person. And I think that if every woman in this room is authentically themselves and genuine and establishes genuine relationships, builds a genuine network, then that's how you can be a woman in the C-suite and still be a woman, whoever that may be.
So one thing I've been thinking about, I'm opening a co-working space, but the Bulletin also recently came out with an article saying that Bend has the highest percentage of remote workers in the country, which is pretty crazy, 12.5%. I think the average is like 2%. So we're kind of at the forefront of this big experiment in what it looks like for a community to have so many people working from home. But the reason I think it's relevant to your question is because a lot of what it traditionally took to be in the C-suite as a man was long hours in the office, lots of FaceTime, travel, and for better or worse, women tend to deal with more of the childcare, elder care, et cetera, and have difficulty doing that. And so I'm really excited and interested in what remote work and small business ownership and being consultants and the ability to do that in today's world, just what that opens up for women who can still get so much done, but maybe it's at 11 o'clock at night after the kids are in bed, and you no longer have to be, in the boardroom. So just an interesting opportunity that I hope we'll see women getting to be CEOs their way.
So sometimes to have your own narrative as a woman and be a woman in the role that you're in means that you have to break or change the rules. And there's been some conversation happening lately around, I'll just go back to being an entrepreneur and funding. Perhaps because we're only getting 2 and 5% of the different pockets of funding that we need to grow businesses. And the statistics show that if it is a woman-founded business, or if there's women on a leadership, they are more likely to be successful and they will make more money. That really gets back to the idea of diversity being important when you're doing these kinds of things. So we've been talking about what are some things that we can do here outside of the box besides traditional loans, applying for venture capital, pitching, constantly pitching and chasing your money. What if we were able to do something very local where it's around local women crowdfunding or microfunding, specific ideas that not only elevate women in business, but also elevate the impact that our women-owned businesses have? So those conversations are happening right now, and if you're interested about women, finance, elevating women in businesses and making ideas happen, come see me at some point or email me. I'd love to talk with you about it.
So this conversation, so I work in tech and work predominantly men. I work with probably men 98% of the time. And this comes up a lot, and it is about we have to make a change. We have to put it with our dollars. So what we've started, Kelly Kersley and myself and a few other ones, is finding out how many women are interested in learning about how to be an accredited investor, how to do crowdsourcing, how to do microfinancing. And so we've set up an email, invested@bendtech.com. Email us if you are interested in coming to the room and finding out more about it. So some of it could be similar to 100 Women Who Care, where you just write a $100 check a month, and your companies that are women focused are coming to the table and pitching, and it could be figuring out, are you an accredited investor? Do you want to get involved with the BVC or seed fund with Cascade Angels, or even going with Seven Peaks and writing some bigger checks? There's a lot of opportunities to get involved, and the only way we're going to make a difference if more of us are at that table making those decisions, where more women are comfortable coming forward and pitching their ideas.
Say the website again.
Invested@bentech.com.
Awesome ideas. Next question from the back.
Thank you so much for your panels tonight. It was really inspiring to listen to you. So I can't help but reflect on just the lack of females we have in leadership, whether it's in small business or the workplace, and sort of the impact of modeling and mentoring that exists, and then becoming part of the problem. So I'm wondering if there are any instances for each of you where you realized that your actions maybe weren't in alignment with what you hope to see. And if you don't, maybe some tips, or for both, in either case, some tips to help women leaders detect when maybe we are entering into biases or just perpetuating the problems.
So there's several classes out there right now. There's a lot of organizations. You'll get some resources about them. We're running a diversity and leadership class. I know that there's several other organizations. There's running classes at COCC and OSU Cascades, the City of Bend, the I3. So getting educated about that and learning how to step in and say things that are coming at you. So going back to my sidestep analogy, if it's coming at you, figure out why. Step aside for a moment, figure out why and how to come back and be able to make your point without being reactionary. We get ourselves, I don't want to generalize, but just like Erica said, we get pigeonholed based on our reactions. And so if we give ourselves the time to come back with a very clear answer that is really non-negotiable, to whatever is coming at us and why we need to be at the table, why we need the raise. We've done our research, and so being able to have those resources and answers. So that's what we wanted to provide, is there's a lot of classes out there. There's a lot of steering committees and things to get the education to move that needle forward.
I would say that believe in yourself. I think women, I know for me, myself, I've been sitting here all night and all day. I dreaded this event. I'm new to Bend. What do I have to say that's valuable to the conversation? Do I really deserve to be up here amongst all these women that have been doing such great things in the community? That's something called imposter syndrome, okay? And yes, I deserve it. Yes, I'm qualified. Yes, I'm educated. So I have to tell myself those things over and over and over again. And sometimes women have to do that, especially when at home we slip into these other roles where people just need things from us and take and take and take. Can you tell I have kids? Yeah. But they need things from us and we lose who we are. So we have to make sure that we remain who we are, in touch with who we are, and maintain our power and just believe in yourself.
All these ladies answered it so well. The idea of, I think I'll just cap on what Terry has said about knowing your why. It's knowing your why and also knowing what your core values are. Because I think having a really good grasp on who you are, why you are who you are, and what are your negotiables and your non-negotiables, and what's the example and the way you want to lead in life is so important. And it's so fun to look around. I see all of these faces of women through here that I know are doing that same thing. They're value-driven, value-led, leading by example, and I just want to thank all of you for your examples.
I'll just give one shout out because being an author is really hard. And Mo Carrick, who's hiding in the back, just wrote, she just wrote a book called Brave Space Workplace, and it's about creating workplaces that are good for humans. And I just saw myself in her book, and I don't see myself in business books very often because there's not very many business books written with women in mind or small business owners in mind. So thank you, and you can be authors too.
Great. So I'm going to go to Katie. You're going to pick on that side, and then I got another one in the back here. Go ahead.
Hi. Thank you all for being here. This event last year was my first chamber event as a new resident in Bend, so I'm really excited for the full circle experience today. And I want to look forward a year and touch on something, Carrie, that you brought up that I think is really important for us to ponder for the next year. I was at a table several months ago with this guy who thought about last year's event and said, why weren't there more men there? And I think this proves the point that you were trying to make, Erica, as well, that representation is important. It's important and it matters. And it matters that men show up here. I would venture a guess that they don't show up here because they don't know if there is a place for them here in this space. Just as women have tried to enter male-dominated spaces, they don't know if they can be here or should be here or would be taking up space that should otherwise be filled by a woman here. And so what can we do over the next year to make sure there are more men here next year?
I'm going to jump in on this one because last year I was on this panel, and the first thing that I said when it came to me was, this is not talking about where women strive and struggle doesn't mean that we're talking about that men need to do worse. This is not about, this is not a zero-sum game. And so I think one of the things we need to do is make sure that we're inviting our male folks to come, the male folks in our life to come and listen and hear what these issues are. The other thing is we probably have to do a better job in terms of marketing these things to make the titling and the messaging a little more inclusive. Join us collaboratively as we break down barriers that relate to women in leadership and in the workspace, and men, how do you contribute to that solution? So I think there's a little marketing challenge on our end, but also just really making sure that we reach out and tell men that this is a space for them, this is a space, and we hope that they can hear and learn.
Thank you. Such an important question. I already spoke to it a bit, so.
Men, tell your friends. and make the word beer bigger.
It's hard to top that one. This is a struggle across the nation. If you look at the South by Southwest, every time they have women-only panel, only women show up in the room. And we have yet to figure this out, why it seems exclusive, because we all go to events where it's all men all the time, and we don't even think about it, but we don't say, here's all the top men. We never have said that. And so I would strive for the day where we don't have women's only events, where it's just the best woman or the best entrepreneur or the best business person. We will get there, but yeah, I think it is trying to figure out where are those inclusive words and how do we get everybody at the table, because we need their voices as well.
I can add one more thing. It's interesting. So my husband, who's one of the men in the room and often is, he was actually talking to me about the fact that he had been in a couple of conversations that were about men's issues, and there was still a majority of women in the room. And so I feel like we just have so much work to do as a society to make it okay for men to talk about their feelings and tough stuff, and to welcome them into these conversations and to support them. And so, it's on the women in the room to welcome those conversations, and it's on the men to invite your friends. And thank you for those of you that showed up. It's a big deal.
Okay, so we've got 5 minutes left. If we could get one or two more questions, that would be awesome. I've got a gentleman who has been waiting, and there's another one up there in the back to ask a question.
No pressure.
Uh-oh. My name is Ken. Thank you all for being here tonight. I'm a lawyer. Don't boo me.
Boo.
But I'm in a traditionally male-dominated field, whether it's law or whatever. At any given time, I have a team of lawyers that work for me on my project, and all of them are women, in between 4 and 8 at any given point. I find that they make better lawyers, Heather. Just FYI. But my question is this. I mean, Erica, you stepped out and you were a single mom, and it's something that most men don't have to deal with, obviously. But how do you make the decision, and how do you encourage women to go back to education or any field that is traditionally male dominated, whether it's higher education or really anything. But how do you push women to say, I can do this, I want to do this, and I will succeed at it? So how do we change that narrative?
I think it starts when they're daughters, little girls. My daughter wants to be a lawyer, and I have instilled in her, as long as I can, that she can do anything. And not only have I instilled that in her, she's seen me do it. Both of them were sitting in the audience when I graduated. So for me growing up, though, I didn't really have the same thing. So it takes drive, determination, certain life circumstances can kick you in gear. I can't speak for anyone but me, but I think it starts when you have little girls or little boys and you want them to be productive members of society that are driven to be all that they can, that you start there. I think that's what matters.
That's a good answer. That's a really good answer. I can remember some of that. One of the things that I used to do is I talked about the game of life. Has anybody played the game of life? Do you remember the first time you played? Yeah? Did you read the rules, or do your friend knew it and said, oh, we got this new board game, you just sat down and jumped in and got your little car, you started adding pegs, and then you got a card that said, swap, salaries with somebody else, and you're like, oh, I don't want to do that, they're my friend. And then there was like, oh, buy insurance, but who wants to buy insurance? We didn't know anything about it. We were like 12, right? And about 2/3 way through the game, you're like, okay, this is boring, and my pegs keep falling out. What am I doing? Because this doesn't look like I'm losing money in this game, right? And you get to the end, and you have to decide, do you go to Millionaire Mansion or the poorhouse? From that moment in time, you never played the game again the same, right? Because you knew the rules. So know the rules going in. Teach the rules. There's so many times that my daughters have told me, how do other people do this? They don't know how to get loans. They don't know how to get their credit score. They don't know how to ask for raises. So if your parents aren't teaching that, find some mentor or somebody that will tell you the rules so that you are not ending up in the poverty house or the poor house at the end.
Okay. Amen. We have time for one more question.
Hi, my name is Kirsten, and I actually am a triplet here. I am a triplet here in Bend, and my sister just had a baby in November, which is really exciting. But shortly after she had her baby, she lost her job. And she is really struggling with that now to figure out how to find either a new job or work-life balance, or choosing her new baby girl over having a career. She doesn't have an education. And so as for successful mothers that have received educations or not in different phases of your life, what advice would you give for someone that is really struggling with that right now?
For me, when I had to work and take care of my kids, that's what I had to do, work and take care of my kids. When they reached a certain age is when I was able to go back to school. My children are 7 years apart, and so my daughter was able to help out with my son, and I could go to class, and or I could take classes online, and I would be up till 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, some nights not sleeping, going back to work the next day. It really takes a level of perseverance that you have to be prepared for. So right now, she just may have to survive and take care of herself and her child, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. That's what she has to do right now. But later on, just make a plan. Just have a plan. I had to have a plan, and it took a while for me to execute that plan, and I'm not done yet. So it just takes time. It really does.
That is so hard. And it is something that, I don't know what percentage of our population, but a big percentage of our population deals with, and we do nothing systemic to support it. So I'm so sorry that that she's going through that, and it's not uncommon. I mean, I would say community. She has got to find the women who are both doing what she dreams of and can, help her see the future, and just the women that are gonna love her and support her. And if she can, I don't know her financial situation, but if she can take this time to think about just what she loves doing and dabble a little bit in some like consulting or something small, she may end up finding that something she loves can actually be a career.
Having been in a very similar situation, I would say it's really hard sometimes because it feels very urgent. It's hard to take the time to step back and be able to outline your assets, and that means the assets that you have internally plus those externally, your support system, the people, the women in your life that support you. But if at all possible, really take that so you can come at it from a strength-driven perspective instead of a need-based, frantic perspective. The other thing I would say is, if she has an idea about what she wants her future to look like, and whether that involves education or a particular career track, is break it down into bite-sized chunks and look at opportunities out there. This that whole eat the elephant. You can't just like wake up one day and all of a sudden I'm the CEO of the Ben Chamber. That you have to step back and think about what are the things that I can do, the actions that I can take, and the roles that I can step into where it gives me those 3 bites that I need to do the next thing. And so it takes a little bit of self-evaluation and step back and being calm, and that's really hard when you're in a stressful situation like that. So good on her, and I would imagine that any of us would be glad to have a chat with her, so please feel free.
Well, we are out of time, and I'm really sorry about that because we were just getting going. And I know there are a million conversations that can be had out there. We're not closing down quite yet. If you want to stay and have those conversations for a little bit, please feel welcome. I just want to take this moment to say thanks to the dudes in the room for coming. Yep. And to thank you all for being here tonight and going on this journey with us. So we've been through, this is the beginning of year 2. We're going to come back next year and tell you all the cool things that we've done this year. And the chamber, we're a convener. We put really smart people in a room, and they go and do these unbelievably fantastic things. If you have an idea, you want to talk to someone, look up Talina, look at myself. Let's go do it. And stand by, because there's some cool things coming down the pike. Want to remind you, April 4th, Woman of the Year Awards. Very different this year. It's at the Eagle Mountain venue. It's all one level. It'll be really a cool opportunity to have these kind of conversations, to celebrate 48 women who were nominated by their peers in this community. And it's going to be emceed by the fabulous Mo Herrick, who is with us tonight. Yay, Mo. And check, there it is. And I hope you all come. So we have some resources for you. There are handouts there on the barrel over in the corner. We can also email these out to you in the morning. What it is a list of different organizations, different movements, and resources that you can use to help build your business, build a kitchen cabinet, resolve an issue, learn a skill, whatever it is. But it's for yours for the taking. So please take one on the way out, and do give us a call if you want more, because we have amazing resources here. And I would like you to help me thank our fabulous panel tonight for all that they did. Carrie has one more thing to say.
I just want to call out one other person in the room, Sally Russell. It is, I mean, if you've never been an elected official, it's really, really hard. And so I think we just have to recognize and thank all of our elected officials, but especially women who take the risk to put themselves in the limelight and make tough decisions, and often don't get a lot of thanks. So,
Way to go, Sally. Thank you. With that, we are wrapped up, and enjoy your evening. Be safe out there and start some conversations.